it's your girl Sherry Lynn, and you're watching Sweep the League on Alamo City Podcast Network.
Hey, this is George Iceman Gervin, and you're listening to Sweep the League.
One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Of course, it is a mic check. It is a Wednesday. That means it's me and Derek Gervin here on Sweep the League. Finally, the show is back. Yeah. Okay, so full disclosure, yesterday my internet, AT&T, it's been shoddy lately. I don't live in San Antonio anymore, so it's been shoddy. It's been up and down, so I'm having issues with it. Luckily, it's working now. They assured me it was working now, so obviously we're live right now. Monday, I just got busy. We're going to get into that talk at the end of the show here about work. So it's going to be kind of some stuff affected here, but this is Sweep the League. Rudy Campos Jr., Tim Gonzalez, of course, is in here. Let's go ahead and bring in the guys here. We've got Derek Gervin joining us, and we've got Coach Gio. Everybody is on the show today. I believe I sent Rock the message, but I'm not sure if he even got it. But anyway, Facebook Messenger is acting up pretty bad. Gentlemen, how y'all doing on a Wednesday, man?
Doing good. You know, Rudy finally paid us, so that's why we're on the show.
Yeah. Doing well. How you doing, Gio?
The check cleared. The check's in the mail. The check cleared. So I already I paid the internet bill. That's what they said. You know what? It's funny. My internet bill comes out of my credit card, so I don't have to pay. It just gets cut out of the credit card, so it's paid every single month that way. But man, we got a couple things to talk about. We're gonna talk about Draymond, obviously his move with Patty Mills, and Gio gives me the smirk because it's Draymond talk. The guy should have been banned a long time ago. Also, a couple of days ago, Nash versus Tony Parker. I commented on Matt Lerma on Twitter, and because he made the comment. I want to bring up the comment, that was made because I don't want to just say a comment and hey, you said it wrong. But the comment that Matt made was the post was something basically Steve Nash was a mid player. And that's kind of so. This is where I'm going to show you the comment here. Let's just get it right. I'm going to show you the comment because I know Derek doesn't have Twitter, but let's bring up the comment. It says there were two multi-hour special spaces last night about who is better, Tony Parker or Steve Nash. I understand arguing with one person about this, but do people generally think that? Because Steve Nash to me was mid compared to Parker, and I've just assumed that was how everyone felt. And of course, you see my comment there. I rarely comment on anything, but calling Nash mid isn't it, man. And it says compared to Tony Parker. So that's the debate that I was looking at. How I get Tony has a finals MVP, but to say Nash was mid, that to me, that's a joke in itself because two-time MVP. If you switch Nash and Tony, obviously Nash wins titles with the Spurs. I mean, that's no doubt. But what is he? 8-time NBA All-Star, 7-time All-NBA team. Tony's made, 2 All-Star games? Or no, he's more made than 2. He's made a few All-Star games. But where could anybody say that Nash was mid? I'm going to go to Derek first on this. But you and I talked a little bit about this, Derek. Nash being mid and compared to Tony better than Nash, make me see it because I don't see it at all.
Well, first I'm going to say good afternoon to everybody out there. Hey, it's just a talk show, so people have to have thick skin.
Yeah, we got to have thick skin.
I think that's a ludicrous comment, first of all. Steve Nash is a 2-time MVP, and a lot of people, they have their favorite players, so they try to overlook some of the things that Steve Nash has accomplished because some people felt Kobe should have been given an MVP, and the story. But if you look at Steve Nash's production, every team that he played on, when he played with Sean Marion or the Amari Stoudemires, he made them a better team. Mm-hmm. And the guy wasn't just given a two-time MVP. He's earned his awards. You know, you're always going to have people that are going to question if this guy actually earned it or not. But Steve Nash was a great player. I also think Tony Parker was a great player. But for me, if I had to pick one, and we're taking away Tim Duncan and we're taking Manu and all these guys away, and we're just going by individuals, I want Steve Nash. I think Tony was a great player. They're both Hall of Famers, first ballot Hall of Famers. But I think Nash, if you break it down, neither one of them were great defensively. But if you look at the offensive side of the ball, I just think Nash brought more to the table than Tony. I think he was a better shooter. I think he was a better ball handler, and I think he was a better passer. Tony was very fortunate. Him and Manu and Tim, they had something great here in San Antonio. But I think Nash could make any team better. I'm not sure if I could say the same about Tony. And it's no slight to Tony Parker. It's just going by what I've seen from watching this game over 50 years.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we're not sliding either player. And you know what? People are going to have favorites, basketball players of all time, and you're going to rank higher. And that's why I've said it multiple times on our show here that I hate the debates. I hate the era debates. I hate the debate between player versus player because let's be real, man. No one's going to be convinced of anything anymore. You throw stats at one side, then the stats go out the window because you know what? This guy had so many titles. So to debate players, in my opinion, is ludicrous in itself because you're always going to bring up a different category to win your debate.
Rudy, can I bring up 3 quick categories?
Sure.
I think people forget. They get a little focused on their feelings getting hurt because the person they wanted to win the MVP didn't win it. My brother finished twice. He was second in the MVP voting. So it happens. But I have to remind people that Steve Nash was a 50, 40, 90 guy. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, he was. And, again, Matt Lerma's brought it up. And that was a conversation. And, Matt, this is not a slight to you at all. This is not anything that we're, picking on you for by all means. This is not any disrespect towards you. It's a comment it's a tweet that you put out there. It's a tweet that I commented on. Love to discuss it. And the best person to discuss it with, the best people to discuss it is with Derek and Gio. I mean, we'll always debate stuff like that. So again, I don't want you to take this as a slight towards you or anything disrespectful towards you. It's a sports talk show. We talk sports. We debate everything. We look at all the aspects of everything. But, and it was kind of a comment that Matt left a little while ago, saying, if he was so good, why didn't he go to the finals? I mean, there's a lot of great players that didn't make it to the finals. If you're going back in NBA history, I mean, there's no.
Matt. Yeah. Hey, Rudy, I'm sorry. Hey, Matt, my last name is Gervin. My brother didn't make it to the finals. Does that mean he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players that didn't make it to the NBA finals. There's a lot of, top 10 players that didn't win an NBA finals. I mean, they never won a title. So
yeah, I mean, to put championships as the only, outlier, I think is doing injustice. We always talk about Charles Barkley, right? He didn't win, right, Derek? But we don't talk about his game. I mean, his game, he was a really good player, right? Like the championship shouldn't always outweigh. And look, we get it. You're defined a lot of times in sports by winning, right? What did you do in those big moments in championships? And look, Tony Parker was a phenomenal player. He won finals MVP. But Steve Nash, 2 MVPs of the actual league, and what he did with the Phoenix Suns, that kind of up and down, offensive system. And remember, his first run in Dallas, Rudy, was really good as well. Obviously it didn't work out, but they ran into the Spurs, right? Steve Nash kept running into the Spurs, but the Spurs had probably, that guy named Tim Duncan really does help shorten a lot of things. And look, as great as Tony Parker was, Rudy, it wasn't until he met with Chip England, that shooting coach, really improved his jump shot and really changed his game to really expand. And I'm not saying before Chip, Tony was terrible. All I'm just saying is for Tony to take that next step, you also have to improve his shooting as well, which is a bit, wouldn't say non-existent, but once Chip changed that, his field goal percentage went skyrocket. And Steve Nash was a great passer. I mean, just fluid with the ball. And if it wasn't for the Spurs, kind of eking them out every year, it's possible Steve Nash does have an NBA championship.
So go back to one series in particular. And again, and I throw the finals MVP out the window because, I mean, Andre Iguodala is a finals MVP. I mean, you had a great series. You're going to be finals MVP. I throw that out the window. But go to a series where you have the Spurs and the Suns. People say, by all means, if Robert Horry doesn't hip check Steve Nash into the boards, into the sideline, then you might be having a different conversation about that series because then you don't have Stoudemire, suspended for the next game, yada, 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 yada. So there could be what ifs on that whole aspect, but the Steve Nash Tony comparison, it's today's sports society. You argue the LeBron and the Jordan aspects. You argue, Jamal Crawford versus Manu Ginobili off the bench as the sixth man. Who was the best? Well, I'm going to throw these stats at you. So stat-wise, Jamal Crawford is the best. But no. Jamal Crawford didn't win. Manu's got the titles, so Manu's the best. There's no sense in arguing anything because there's not going to be a winner. And Matt's back in here as well. He says, I'm just saying, in the pocket of the conversation, you're talking about building a team around a player. Why would you take a player that never got his team over the hump instead of a finals MVP? Tony would have never got the Spurs to the finals if not for Tim Duncan. I mean, that's how you make it make sense.
It's Tim Duncan. And look, no disrespect to Tony, right? Phenomenal player. But to say you wouldn't pick someone just because he didn't win a championship. Dan Marino, one of the greatest throwers of the football. We all can agree, Rudy. He never won a Super Bowl. But I tell you what, if you tell a lot of GMs in today, what quarterback would you bring in today's NFL? I tell you what, Dan Marino would be on the top of almost every list, if not all lists. So I hear what Matt's saying, but look, Steve Nash in his day was what was asked for Steve Nash, right? It was an up and down system, Rudy. They weren't playing any defense, right? No. So what was asked of Steve Nash? Also, look, in 2010, the Suns did sweep the Spurs 4-0 in the NBA playoffs. So there goes something there. But yeah, no, I mean, look, if you want Tony over Steve, that's great. But to diminish an individual player, I don't completely agree just because they didn't win a championship.
Gio, I want to say this, and it's to Matt and it's to anybody else out there listening. Matt, I love what you're saying and you're participating in the show, but when have you ever heard the word exciting attached to Tony Parker's name when he was playing? I heard that attached to Manu Ginobili. I never heard that attached to Tony. Tony was a solid player, but Tony wasn't exciting. Steve Nash, on the other hand, could pass the ball with either hand. He could shoot the ball with either hand. Steve Nash was very exciting. That's why people tuned in. If I remember correctly, they were the team that was getting the ball up the court in 7 seconds, Gio? Rudy?
Yeah.
That was because of Steve Nash. That wasn't, yeah. So Tony fell into a good system. And you have to remember this, Matt. That team wasn't built around Tony Parker. That team was built around Tim Duncan. As Tim Duncan aged, Tony Parker became more of a leader on that team. But never forget that team was built around Tim Duncan. And then as you age, he passed the torch to Tony Parker. Nash never had to pass the torch. Nash was the leader, the go-getter for the Phoenix Suns. They're both great players, but you can't base everything on championships because there have been some great players. And if you notice, the only players that go in as a team into the Hall of Fame are the Harlem Globetrotters. The Hall of Fame is about what you did as an individual. That's rings or no rings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a debate of a debate. I'm gonna put it that way. I mean, if you want to take Tony Parker to build around, take Tony Parker to build around. I mean, the guy led the league in points in the paint for crying out loud as a point guard. Crying out loud, man. I mean, I'm not gonna slight you if you'd rather have Tony Parker as a starting point guard over Steve Nash. I'll never say, whoa, that's BS. For me, it's Steve Nash because of what we're saying, how much he brought to the table. Throw defensive rating out the window because both players' defensive rating for their career is pretty similar. So we can't even debate the defensive side.
No,
Tony has
yeah.
a lot more steals.
Rudy, let me
than
say
Nash.
this quickly before Gio chimes in. If
Yeah.
you look at where they're going to go down in history, if right now Steve Nash is rated above Tony Parker, and Tony Parker has 5 championships, and Steve Nash has 0, but Steve Nash is still considered by many people a top 10 point guard. You have some that might feel that way about Tony, but you can never take away that the man won 2 MVPs in the regular season. And in my mind, from what I saw, he earned them.
Oh, yeah. And even though, our compadre Shaquille O'Neal said Steve Nash stole the MVP, hey, at the end of the day, he was still voted the MVP. And just, look, if you want to talk about point guards, we could talk about different styles, right? You got Jason Kidd, right? You got that kind of raw Gary Payton, really in your face style point guard. John Stockton, the guy who's going to give you a few elbows and also pass the ball. It's just all types of point guards. So for Tony, as Rudy said, look, he led the league in that paint. I mean, he was a phenomenal scorer. Inside that ring there, he was at times unguardable, right? He's twisting, he's turning. And that floater shot he had as well was just unbelievable, especially towards that middle run there, like in 2003, 2004, when up against the Lakers. The Lakers had no chance, though. Derek Fisher, that's the backbreaker there. But
hey, Gio, I want you to tell me today, and this guy is still playing, but who do they call the point guard that's playing today? The point guard. He plays for Golden State
Chris
Warriors.
Paul.
How many championships does Chris Paul have?
0. He's been close, but
he has 0 championships, but he's still called the point guard. That there should show that it's not always based on just of team accomplishments. You got to look at what the person did with their career.
I would take Chris Paul over Tony if Chris Paul doesn't have those injuries and those just. I mean, the guy always seemed to get hurt when you need the most, and of course, you need to be available. But if all healthy, ready to go, Chris Paul as a point guard, he can also be a nuisance as well on the court. Which, by the way, Chris Paul, what he said, I don't know, Rudy, if you caught what he said to the ref about TikTok.
No.
And Tony Brothers, and Tony Brothers gave him a technical foul for saying, you just trying to be famous out here. Kudos to Chris Paul, because I saw that interview. Chris Paul must have saw that kind of in passing and remembered to say that to Tony Brothers, and Tony was pissed. But anyway, yeah, I mean, look, we can debate all day. Everyone has their opinion, but man, Steve Nash, he was no slouch.
No, he wasn't. And again, this is a good conversation to have, and that's all we do. We're not here to get under people's skin or whatever, but Matt comes in, says, I never said Nash didn't earn anything. My point is that when it came down to it, Tony got the job done 4 times in the finals, and Nash never made it to the dance. Timeout. Because no, timeout. Give me this moment here. Because where you make that comment, Matt, I'm going to give you 1 time for sure, which is when he was MVP. 2 other times, yeah, he was able to help out. In another finals, it was Tim and Manu. That was against Detroit. Tony had a decent series there. But there was one series in particular against the New Jersey Nets where Tony was outshined by another point guard, and you saw Speedy Claxton there at the end of the game finishing out most of these games in the finals. So no, Tony did not get the job done 4 times in the finals.
And all these rumors of the Spurs trading Jason Kidd
for
Tony Parker. That was all out there, by the way. And Jason Kidd only has 1 championship. Only 1, and he was great in Dallas. But all I'm just saying is there were rumors, Rudy. Now, where there's smoke, there's fire. We can agree. Pretty sure the Spurs may have thought, man, if we can get Jason Kidd for Tony Parker, they probably would have done it if, probably someone stepped in. But yeah, it's listen, man, basing everything off of championships, all I'm going to say is you got to also read in between the lines and really separate. Sure, the ultimate goal is championships, but you also got to see the talent. What did they do with what they had? And sure, Steve had a really good team in Dallas with Dirk Nowitzki, though Dirk wasn't Dirk quite just yet. And then obviously in Phoenix, we had a really talented team, though didn't play a lick of defense.
Yeah, and Matt did say J Kidd is still doing good in Dallas. J Kidd is doing really good things in Dallas right now. Those transactions that they made for PJ and Gafford, those are paying off big time for Dallas, and you're actually seeing it right now. Jason Kidd, doing great there. Tim Gonzalez is in here. Don't forget Derek Gervin, the Dream Team went into the Hall of Fame. They were all Hall of Famers regardless.
Right. Thank you, Rudy, for answering that.
That's right, baby. Christian Laettner, baby. Woo! Christian Laettner, Rudy. That's right. Hall of Fame, baby.
Christian Laettner would not be an NBA.
Hey, Rudy, all I want is for Matt and Tim to understand is that it's not always about the team. Sometimes you got to break down what the players do individually. And that's what we base a lot of players off. Championship or no championship. A lot of people consider Wilt Chamberlain the greatest. Wilt won 2 championships. But sometimes you don't have the other guys to help you get over the hump. And that doesn't diminish. You cannot diminish what a player did individually. When I practiced this game at the playground, I didn't have a team out there with me. When I was at UTSA, when I practiced before I went there, I practiced to work on my craft to be the best player that I can be. My jersey's hanging up there at UTSA. My team's not hanging up there. Sometimes you have to look at what an individual player does, and that's what you go by. If you don't have the pieces, you don't have the pieces. And sometimes you got to remember that. Tony's a great player. When I got my jersey retired, there was 2 people sitting in the front right by where I walked. One of them name was George Gervin. The other one's name was Tony Parker. So I have a lot of respect for Tony Parker. I think Tony is a great player. I was glad to see him go into the Hall of Fame. I think he earned it. But this is not to slight Tony Parker, and it's not to slight Steve Nash. Both were great players, and it's not about championships. Take away the championships, they're still both great players, and that's what I go by.
Also, to add another note, hey, the word sacrifice, right? There's so many been players that, in this league having to sacrifice. Look at Kevin Love. Kevin Love was balling in Minnesota. I mean, he was a machine. Goes to Cleveland, and he had to sacrifice his game, right? We do think of him a bit differently, but we know how talented he was, especially in those early years in Minnesota. But
hey, Gio, 26-12 as a Timberwolf.
Yeah, no. So does that mean Kevin Love, once he went to the Cavs, it diminished his career because he wasn't, the guy anymore, right? He had to play second fiddle to the players around him, right? Do we think differently of Kevin Love? I don't, because I know in Minnesota, granted, it was a one-man show, but you still got to perform. You still got to go out there and play the game, and he did it.
Yeah, speaking of Nash, and I love the Nash conversation and those Phoenix Suns, but I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to think about this. What was that Suns team missing? Because if I'm remembering correctly, they were the best team in the league, a year or two for a while there? I mean, you can't say they were missing size. They had Stoudemire. I think Boris Diaw was still there at the time. You talk about speed and up and down the court. They had Nash. They had Barboza. They had defense. And what's his name? Raja Bell.
Raja Bell. I'm glad you brought him up, Rudy, because you just answered what they were missing. One thing they were missing was a guy named Kobe Bryant, and another thing they were missing was a guy named Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, that's true.
Also Joe Johnson. Didn't he fracture something on his face, Rudy? He had that that mask. Stoudemire got hurt in 2006. There were some key injuries, and hey, let's not forget that hip check Robert Horry did, Rudy. That was a pivotal look.
That was bad, dude.
That was a pivotal thing that Robert did. Now Robert Horry now goes on his own tangents on other podcasts, but that was a sacrifice that Robert Horry did. And look, if Robert Horry doesn't do that, we don't obviously know what happens. But Phoenix is full go there with everyone playing.
I don't think the Spurs win. I'm going to go on the record and say that was a series the Suns would have won and possibly could have won the title that year. To me, that was Phoenix's best chance.
Who did he hip check?
Nash into the board.
Yeah, I know.
I
know exactly who it was.
Exactly.
And a few guys came off the bench. I believe they also got suspended as well.
They got suspended, and that was the end of the series.
The NBA and many sports, sometimes it's just inches. In this case, it was a hip check, and people coming out the bench. Steve Nash's nose is bloody. I mean, look, we can say all that about Nash coming up short, but there were some things that happened. Unfortunately, in sports, it always happens. You know, you come up short. But yeah, that Spurs series, I was very, very worried because that could have really went south. And if the Suns get to the finals when 05 they play the Pistons, that would have been a fun. That's a straight defensive team, whereas there's an offensive team. Chances are maybe Detroit wins back-to-back there. But
it's questionable. Yeah, I'm a Detroiter, Gio. I would have been nervous.
Those Piston teams, man. You want the epitome of like blue collar, man.
Hey, Rudy, and you and Gio. Speaking of that Pistons team, what superstars did they have?
None.
They didn't have superstars, but they see that's a situation where you had a team that was doing things, but they didn't have a guy like a Steve Nash. Steve Nash is a superstar. No matter what team he would have played on, he still would have been a superstar. And Tony, I honestly question. Tony got, I believe, with the right situation. There's some players, wherever you put them, they're going to be stars. And there's some guys you question because you don't know, are they system players? The same as they ask in other sports. Is this guy a system player, or is he a guy that can get it done anywhere? And I think very highly of Tony Parker. Steve Nash, we might not agree, and it's okay to disagree, agree to disagree, but both were fantastic players, and I was just excited to see both of them in their primes.
Yeah, I mean those Piston teams, man. You're right. No star, like no superstars. They had stars. I mean, I would consider Chauncey Billups star.
2004 team had, I mean, in the finals, Shaq, right, kind of in his prime, kind of starting to let himself go weight-wise, but they still had Malone, Gary Payton, all these Hall of Famers, and the Pistons. I mean, when you watch Ben Wallace just going mano-a-mano against Shaq, and Shaq not doing what he could, and Kobe kind of, it was just, that was a beauty to watch. That should have been a sweep, Rudy. It should have been a sweep because that first game was real close, and the Pistons had a chance at the end of the game, but that defense, we will never see a defense like that ever unless the rules obviously change, which I don't think it's going to change like that.
I agree with that. I agree. In my lifetime, I don't think I'll see a defensive team like that. I agree.
No, man. And that's kind of man, I actually miss those kind of days. People gripe about the 84 to 87 scores and all that, but I like the grinded out games, man. Players are clanking the shots. Well, it's not so much that they're clanking the shots. It's when you make it tough for an NBA player to score. I mean, it's a wear and tear, man.
I remember when the Spurs unfortunately lost in the first round to the Grizzlies. Dude, that Grizzlies team, I'm sure Dick probably remembers, it was just they called it the grindhouse. For you to go in there and win a game with Randolph, and now Randolph's
and Mark Gasol, and was Paul with them at that time as well?
No, because
Mark was there.
It was Mark Gasol,
Mike Conley,
Randolph Conley.
Yeah,
was there.
Conley.
Was Tony Allen?
Tony Allen
was there.
Tony Allen was there. It was a rough. I could remember watching a certain play and looking at Duncan and thinking, I gotta go up against these two big boys in the post, and that just the whole grind. The NBA is missing that. It's missing. Sure. 85, 87 is not a great score. But, man, when you play defense like that, and that was at a time where the rules were still pretty lenient, and the rules are still, but the problem is the refs. I mean, they're calling fouls left and right, really changing mentalities. And Draymond Green, not to go off topic, somebody needs to hit this guy, man. I don't want to say violence, Rudy, but somebody got to do something, man. Some enforcer.
Yeah, we're going to get into Draymond here in just a minute. We're only here for you till 5 o'clock today. We're going to get off at 5 o'clock. We're with you for an hour. It is Sweep the League. Derek Gervin, Coach Gio. Before we get to the Draymond talk, Locked On Spurs, Jeff Garcia's very own Locked On Spurs. Speaking of power defenses, look at the San Antonio Spurs 99 team defensive rating. I think it was a 95. Though you talk defense, especially in the Duncan era, Spurs were up there. You know, the Pistons were up there with Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace, Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups. Other teams out there, you know, I mean, to be honest, there was a team in the East that was a defensive presence team that made it to the finals, and they just ran into a very good Lakers team, and that was the 76ers. You know, when you had Eric Snow, Aaron McKee, Dikembe Mutombo, Tyrone Hill's another one. That was a team built
George Lynch.
Oh, George Lynch is another one.
Hey, you're a North Carolina guy. You know I had to throw
Matt,
George in there.
I think Matt Geiger was still on that team, Rudy.
Matt was there. Yeah, see, they had a good defensive team.
So that begs the question: can defense still get you far in the NBA? I mean, right now they want scoring, but if you had a defensive presence on your team, that would shut scoring down. So Rudy, if they can't score the basket,
Rudy, you're looking at it right now in New York.
Yes, the
Knicks have held several teams under. If you look at
that's a mentality, though, Derek.
Yeah, they've held. If I'm correct, the Knicks have held 23 teams under 100 points this year. That's more than about Golden State, the Spurs, like 6 or 7 teams combined. So I know they haven't been healthy all the way, but they're getting Mitchell Robinson back at some point, and they're getting Julius Randle back. If they continue to defend like that, hey, they're a dangerous team against anyone in the Eastern Conference.
Well, you know that it's a mentality thing, Derek. Who's their coach, right?
Tom Tibbs. Tibbs is not going to take anything else.
Tibbs doesn't take anything else, and also there's been at times in his career there's been friction with players saying, "Hey, man, you taking it too much, coach. Like, lighten up." It's like, you know, Pop used to be that way, but now, you know, the team isn't very good. So there's no need to really push defense when half the guys won't be there anyway next year. So, it's
man, that's a conversation. You know what? We'll have that conversation at the end of the show today because I want to get both of y'all.
You guys know how I feel about this. Most of the players need to be replaced next year.
I get you. Let me go to a commercial break here. When we come back, Draymond Green talk, and then we're going to talk San Antonio Spurs basketball because it's funny. I was actually on Locked On Spurs, Jeff Garcia's show recently. We talked about who's safe and who's not. This is Sweep the League, Derek Gervin, Coach Gio. Pretty accomplished. We'll be back.
Locked On Spurs is your daily Spurs podcast, hosted by Jeff Garcia, the lead Spurs writer for Ken's 5 San Antonio. Jeff has a healthy plethora of guests all the time on the Locked On Spurs podcast. You can also follow Jeff on Threads at Jeff G Ken's 5 SA. You can also follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff G Spurs Zone. So make sure you go ahead and give Jeff a follow not only on Threads and Twitter, but also on YouTube at youtube.com/@Locked On Spurs. This is where you're going to be able to find the replay of the Locked On Spurs podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share.
Yeah, Jeff Garcia, Locked On Spurs, all part of the Locked On Network. Great Spurs content, probably the best in the business. Definitely go follow Jeff Garcia. So I'm going to bring up the Draymond stuff here. Let's get into it. This is all for you guys right here. We got video evidence there of Draymond. We're going to blow this up a little bit more, go into town on Patty. So common foul was called. I mean, you see Patty setting the screen. All of a sudden, hey, you know what? I'm going to fight through the screen, but what am I going to do? I am literally going to give you the old Hart Foundation for you old WWF guys finishing move where Bret Hart comes off the ropes and just clotheslines the opponent. Draymond, you've seen this kind of stuff from Draymond over and over again. And he must have a picture of Adam Silver in women's underwear because there's no reason why Draymond should be in the league anymore, Derek.
You know how I feel about Draymond. A lot of people out there might not know, but I'm from Michigan. Draymond's from Saginaw, Michigan, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And I'm embarrassed, man. This just continues to happen. And if you look at it right there. Look how he's acting, how he's faking, like he's falling, like he's off balance. That's what I'm tired of, man. Why would he do that to Patty Mills? For what reason? And then I had some people talking about Patty flopping and all that. But are they focusing on this incident? The man has his hand around his neck. And what's the purpose of doing that? I mean, that's totally out of bounds. That is not basketball. And you know, Rudy, I've talked to Adam Silver before. And I don't like to – I think he's a great man, very nice man. And we've talked on Messenger more than once. But to keep allowing this, man, it just sends a bad message. We keep talking about setting being role models, setting good examples for the kids. And I know Charles Barkley said, I am not a role model and all that crap, but we are role models. And we got to set a better examples. And this right here, man, I'm just tired of seeing it. If you look at it this year, we know about the Jordan Poole incident last year. So this year, there's been Nurkic, there's been Gobert, and I told you earlier, Rudy, those two. You had this incident with Patty Mills, and last week you had Aldama. So you got all foreign guys, all four that he's had confrontations with recently. And this is after his suspension. After the Nurkic suspension, he continues with the same behavior. And I think it puts a black mark on the NBA. And I got to be honest, I'm ashamed to Joe Dumars. And these guys keep allowing this. Adam Silver keeps allowing this. And I think it's time to put a stop to it.
I agree 100%, man. It's got to come to us. It's got to come to a halt, man. This is getting
Look
bad.
at his back, man. You could have hurt that guy, man.
I don't. Time after time after time, you see Draymond do these things. My thing also, though, if Draymond's going to be doing this, Derek, let's bring back the NBA enforcers. We don't have that anymore, right? Every team really doesn't have a guy coming out there starting, not necessarily to swing, but these teams, though, I would like to see someone say, hey, you know what? You're not going to do that to Patty today.
Gio, I'm sorry, but you know why they don't? I want you to think about this. All the stuff Draymond has gotten away with, right? And Rudy said what he said about Adam Silver, and I don't know if Draymond's blackmailing the league or whatever it is. But think, if you were to retaliate, you know what they say about the second person, right?
That's the thing.
And that's what scares me, man. You have someone that's tired of putting up with this nonsense, say a Tony Allen type guy, a Zach Randolph, a DeMarcus Cousins type guy. Their punishment will be combined. It will be more than Draymond's combined punishments and fines overall. And that's where I have the biggest problem with it.
I think it's coming, though, Derek. It could, if Draymond doesn't be careful, one of these days is going to be the wrong guy at the wrong time. And we know what happened in the past with some players. You know, Rudy Tomjanovich he almost died. And I don't want nothing like that to happen. But all I'm saying with Draymond, he keeps acting up like this, keep doing these things. For what? Nobody in the NBA is really doing things like this, but you. You're putting people in harm's way. And if you want to say Patty flop, whatever. But look, his neck is literally bent backwards. And Draymond is having his hands up like this. For what? What are you trying to say here? You're literally almost whiplash this guy, this point guard, shooting guard. It's like, it's just ridiculous. The NBA has got to step in or someone is going to get hurt.
Did you guys, Gio and Rudy, did you see the video when Draymond on his show, he was talking to about Kenyon Martin laying out Karl Malone? You know, he cheap shot at Karl Malone because Karl had gave Isaiah what Draymond said 14 stitches, but it was actually 42. Did you guys see him on his podcast laughing?
I did not, but I did remember when Kenyon gave his explanation why he went after Karl.
Well, Draymond thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course he would. And look, the way the NBA is today, we're not talking about the 80s. This is not acceptable. There needs to be changes. And Adam Silver, I don't know, what is he doing? Is he just taking a look? Keep suspending him, keep fining him. If you know what, Derek, if you're gonna fine him, how about you start really fining them? Really fine them.
Yeah, those fines are like dropping the buckets to those guys. They carry money, man. I played in that league, man. Even back when I played, the money wasn't what it is today. But those guys walked around with thousands in their pockets then, the Derek Colemans and those guys. So this is just a drop in the bucket to these guys, man. You're making $28, $30 million a year. You finding them.
Would you say
$35,000.
Suspending for 30, 40 games.
No, I already said what he should have been suspended when he did it to Nurkic. He should have been suspended for the year or out the league. They keep saying if you continue, it's like a criminal. They talk about recidivism. If you continue to reoffend, what's going to happen to you? Eventually, they throw the book at you, don't they?
Yeah.
So why is Draymond different? It's not like this is something that just started this year or last year. This has been throughout his career. And it bothers me the most because it's like these other guys' careers matter to me. He should not have to seriously injure or maim someone before he is dealt with. That's what bothers me the most, is caring about these other guys' careers. And if Draymond doesn't care about their career, that's not going to stop me from caring. And I just hope the NBA will just care a little more. It's their product.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Before I get into my take, Jeff wants to know, Gio, if Draymond did that to you, would you throw hands with Draymond? Or what would you
Listen, I started playing basketball as a young kid in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I would play street ball, and I would see things out in the street. I'm sure Derek probably saw it as well. People fighting, people throwing elbows. I'm sorry, if Draymond Green comes at me, he might catch me on a good night where I don't care, but if he catches me on the wrong, I'm going to do something to Draymond. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to incriminate myself.
I hate to tell you guys this, and I'm glad that, thank God for maturity, but I'm just being honest. I broke a few noses overseas. And I'm not laughing because, man, I got to the point over there. I know how physical it is overseas, and I don't mind physical basketball. But when you start trying to hurt me intentionally, the referees aren't going to protect me at that point, and they're not going to protect you either. So sometimes you have to take things in your own hands. I hate to say that, but I'm being honest. I grew up under a different cloth. And if the referees weren't going to deal with it, Derek's going to deal with it. I'm not having anybody out there cheap shotting me, and I'm not having anybody out there cheap shotting my teammates. And that includes a Draymond Green.
I 100%, man. I 100%. You got to protect yourself at all costs. But the point I was going to get to was, what does Draymond bring to the league that you guys are correct? Why he should be banned? But for what reason, other than the fact that we jokingly say he has something on the league or Adam Silver, what does he bring to the league that makes you feel that he needs to stick around? I mean, he's not a superstar. He's not a face of the league. He's a menace to the league. I mean, to be honest, there's times I wish I could get into a Twitter battle with him and say, okay, when you're back in San Antonio, let's talk face to face. Guarantee he won't do it. It won't happen because, of course, it's going to be protected. But what does he bring to the league other than just, being a nuisance that keeps him in the NBA, in the game itself?
Rudy, don't leave out what he does to the referees 82 games a year, how he berates the officials.
Oh, yeah.
And how he goes to them in an aggressive manner as well.
That's another one.
Yeah. He's always coming at. For every game, you just see him. And is he a ticking time bomb? Listen, he's regressed as a player. I think we all can agree. Sure, he has highlights and flashes every now and then, but he's an aging player, and maybe this is what he feels like he needs to do to stay relevant. He has a podcast, right? He does podcasts after his games, and I don't know what else is he doing. He's not really contributing the way he used to be. And sure, back then he was still doing, he was doing this, but now it seems like Derek every night he's flipping somebody else.
It's every night, man. There's not a game that goes by when he suits up that he's not into some kind of altercation. I don't know if who he's trying to be from the UFC or the WWF, but at some point you got to start thinking about the health and welfare of the other players, and that's what I think now at this point. He doesn't even care because he know the refs aren't going to deal with him. And you guys have watched him play over his career. And this bothers me as well. Have you noticed when a lot of certain guys, when they get one technical foul, Gio, Rudy, they just go overboard after that because they know they're not going to get that second technical foul call.
Yeah.
And he's the poster guy for that. So it's like he doesn't respect the league. And if you even listen to his interviews or on his podcast after he gets in trouble, when he goes on his podcast, he doesn't sound like he's a guy that regrets the things that he's done. And he says it verbally, and they still do nothing about it.
Yeah, they don't. And that comes back to the league in general. I mean, you've got to have, I've told Derek many times, Adam Silver just doesn't have a spine. He doesn't have the balls.
Didn't he say he wasn't going to change? Everybody saw it on ESPN.
Yeah,
didn't he say that?
Yeah.
He said it wasn't going to change. So to me,
and he hasn't.
And that's the problem is if you know a player is like this and he's out there injuring guys, what the hell? You're supposed to have your players' safety and protection first and foremost. I mean, you put rules into the game to protect players, but you can't put the players out of the league.
Hey, Gio, let me remind people of this. When they played Aldama and those guys, when they played Memphis, didn't Taylor Jenkins end up going down to the ground?
Yeah,
I think it was Taylor. Rudy Gobert should have did something.
But I'm just saying, just think if the coach gets hurt, then they might act on it. If Taylor Jenkins, thankfully nothing serious happened to him. But who was the one involved in the incident first? Who was the one grabbing Aldama by the collar and all that first? Wasn't that Draymond and Green again?
Yep.
Draymond.
I mean, come on, man.
And for what reason? Go back on that play. What was the reason behind Draymond going after Aldana? There was nothing. He made a basketball move. He got to the basket, scored the bucket. What was the reason behind that? There was no reason to make any type of move towards him.
I would have loved if Rudy Gobert would have just sent a message. Just send a message. I don't care how you do it.
It's going to take that. It's going to take someone cocking back, popping him in his eye, and making him go down. It's going to take that. You know what? I am 100% on this point. If someone goes after Draymond, I don't think any of his teammates protect him. They just try to hold him back. They're not going to fight for him.
Oh, no. Just imagine if Vernon Maxwell was still in the NBA or some of these dudes that flip of a switch.
Mad Max went into the stands in Portland.
Vern would actually swing on him. I know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, yeah.
Vern would actually swing on him. And it shouldn't come to that point. Vern shouldn't have to be put in that kind of situation. And that's what I'm worried about today. That's why I think these guys don't do it now, because if they retaliate, they're going to end up the ones that suffer for it. And Draymond will still be doing the Draymond things.
Yeah, and Jeff Garcia is bringing up a point there. It says, you all think guys like Oakley, X-Men, which is Xavier McDaniel, Bill Laimbeer would have laid him out by now if they were playing today. I don't have – the moment he did something – it's kind of weird because that's what I was saying. If he pulls this stunt on Joe Dumars or Isaiah Thomas, or Joe Dumars, you'll have Zeke, Laimbeer, Mahorn, whoever's on the court, all going after Draymond. And someone's getting a nice little lick in there on Draymond. You go the same way. The Celtics, Parrish, McHale, Bird. I mean, you've seen Bird take swings at Julius Erving for crying out loud.
You know what?
That's what I'm saying. These guys would go at him, but nobody in the NBA will set the tone and get the message across.
Rudy, you got to remember now. Gio, I'm sorry. You got to remember this too, though. Most of these guys are young guys.
They're friends.
I mean, they're not established. They haven't been around like the people that on this list, the Oakleys and the Laimbeers and those guys and the Xavier McDaniels. A lot of these guys are still 23, 24 years old. Mm-hmm. And so they're not going to respond the way that the veterans, I'll say, will respond. So Draymond knows that. You know how bullies, you guys know about bullies. Y'all had them in school, middle school, high school. They only pick on certain people. They don't pick on certain people like a Charles Oakley. So I'm glad his name is on this list first, because Draymond wouldn't even think of approaching Charles Oakley with that nonsense.
Oh, no. And to pick it back on the story, Derek, Charles Barkley, when he first came into the league, it was a preseason game between the Sixers and the Celtics. And Charles was talking about, he says this was a serious game. He says in a preseason game that the Sixers, I think they played the Celtics the year before in the playoffs. And I believe Chuck said that there was a fight that went out in a preseason game, Derek. That's how bad a lot of these players didn't like each other. As Rudy's point, these players hang out together. They go on vacations. They go out with their families, and there's nothing wrong with that. All I'm just saying is that mentality. And also another point, there's no veterans on these teams, Derek.
Right.
They have moved the veterans essentially going overseas. This is what the veterans are doing now, Rudy. They're overseas. They're playing in China. They're playing in this league, in different areas. And just imagine if DeMarcus Cousins is on a roster.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because the veterans these days are, like Derek and you're saying, like 23 years old, 24 years old, and you're a veteran. You're an NBA vet already, like 4 or 5 years in the league. I mean, that is. I
would love if the NBA, and I know they won't do this, they institute a rule where every team should have at least one veteran player, at least one veteran, at least. A lot of these rosters, Derek, you take a look. These kids are the oldest guys, like 25, 26 years old.
Did you ever see Draymond? Have you ever seen him go after Bam Adebayo like that?
No.
Never.
And the only way he went at Steven Adams was by kicking him in his private part, but he wouldn't go after a Steven Adams type guy like that either. He's a bully, and I just hope that the NBA gets tired of it. It's not like he's bringing anything positive to the league right now. They say he does a lot for the Warriors on the court, but I think he takes away from that as well with all these antics that he does, and that takes away from the basketball aspect. And I just think it's time for him to go. But I've thought that for the last couple of years.
Well, also one last point. Remember, he said a certain word to Kevin Durant. He's done things to his own teammate. He punched his teammate. He said certain things to Kevin Durant and other teammates in the past. And look, I like his intensity, all that stuff, but dude, you're just going overboard now. It's just an everyday thing. I don't know if he hates life or what the case may be, but as Derek said, after his podcast, it don't look like he's really phased at all.
He doesn't care. That's what it comes down to. The guy just doesn't care. And I don't mind you coming out and playing hard every night. Yeah. That's basketball. But when you're making idiotic, dirty plays night in and night out, we got an effing problem, bro. Like, we've got an effing problem. Jeff is saying beef stew, Isaiah Stewart coming at Dre. Well, we've seen him come after a couple.
I hope not, Jeff, because I talked to Isaiah last month when I was in Detroit, and I talked to him about making actually on his wedding day, and it was February 22nd. I could tell you the date, and I talked to him about making better decisions. So I hope he's not the guy.
Yeah, I remember and that's why I brought it up, because I saw you were with him last month when y'all were in Detroit. Detroit. I don't know, man. I think Isaiah. I think Isaiah could really. I think he really could go after Draymond really, really hard, and that would be pretty intense, man. This is Sweep the League. Rudy Campbell Jr., Derek Gervin. Before we go, we got a couple of minutes left here. We got to get into Spurs talk real quick. I was recently on Jeff's show, Locked On Spurs, this past week, and the question was brought up. Basically, who do you bring back if you're looking at everybody? Do you just wipe the slate clean and say, if you can get people for Devin Vassell, picks for Devin Vassell, you trade him, and basically Wemby's the only guy you don't move on from? Personally, I suck as a GM, because if Gio is the GM of so-and-so and Derek's GM of so-and-so, and both you guys called me and said, what do you want for Victor Wembanyama? I'm like, hey, you know what? He's off limits, but what are you offering? I gotta take the phone call on everybody. So I would definitely take the phone call. But outside of Wemby, I mean, I told Jeff and I told Locked On Network, basically, to be honest, if I'm thinking Spurs mentality, Derek and Gio, the team that you see there is probably going to be the same team you're going to see next year. I don't see anything happening. Maybe you see Keldon Johnson being moved, maybe, but you're going to see Sohan. I'm still not a believer in Jeremy Sohan. I got a lot of hate for that, but I'm still not a believer in Sohan. Devin Vassell, I think, is a great Nightwing to Batman and Robin, which is a third-rate character. He's a third player option on the team. The team you see now is the team you're going to get. Do you guys see any moves being made in the offseason? Even though I told Jeff, do you really think you think the front office for the Spurs gives a damn about what the fans say? No, fans want change, but if you're really thinking about it, I don't see moves being made.
Well, I'll be quick. Rudy, I like guys like Champagne. I like Branham. I think those are good guys that are going to have a future in this league. But if I'm the GM, I'm going to visit Victor and his, I hear it's a $14 million home or whatever. I'm going out to his house and we're sitting down and I'm taking out my piece of paper and I got all the players on there on that list. And I'm giving Victor a pen and you check this name, who you want to remain. And I'm going from there. And I think if you really want to do that, if they did that in private, I think there might be a couple guys left. I think he likes playing with Sohan when he's not doing silly things like trying to hurt his shoulder from behind, all that kid stuff. But I could see Sohan staying. I used to be really high on Devin, but after that 2-point game he had recently, I don't know. But I could see Sohan staying. But other than that, man, I think anybody can go. Anybody.
I think so. I mean, there's nobody on this team. And I love it because Spurs fans will probably come hard on all of us for telling the truth, but there's nobody on this team that I am tied down to. I mean, Wemby's probably the only guy that I'm tied down to, saying, okay, he's going to be a Spur. But if you're asking me who would you trade, who would you keep, I'd keep Victor. I'd keep my draft picks for next season. Outside of that, who do you want? I mean,
you got to remove that maybe when you talk about Victor.
Yeah, Rudy. I was just
no. I mean, I would. Okay, I will keep Victor. I will keep Victor. And now, unless Victor comes to me and says, you know what, I'm not going to be a Spur much longer. Because
that's still not going to work either. Tim Duncan, they didn't let Tim go to Orlando. Victor.
It was Doc Rivers.
That was Doc Rivers' fault.
That's your Wemby's your foundation. It's just building around him. If we can get Trae Young, I think it would be a good start. And maybe Klay Thompson, and then go from there.
I like
to Derek's point, I'm going to pick off of him. Look, it's a players' league, right? Your stars shine. And right or wrong, whatever you agree or disagree, it's a players' league. You go to Victor this offseason, you have to include him. Look, he's going to be the face of the league. He is a tremendous player. We've seen just flashes of just sitting back there like, this dude had a triple-double with 10 blocks, Derek.
Pure brilliance, G.
10 blocks is ridiculous, right? So you go to him this offseason. I do like Devin. The 2-point game it's just not.
It was an aberration. I'll agree with that. Yeah.
It was an aberration, but I would love to keep him just because I think, to Rudy's point, he's a good night wing. He's a good guy to have there. But you know how I feel about Zach Collins. He's got to go.
Gone.
Your other point guard was Jones. He's got to go.
What about Trae as a backup, Gio? What about if you get Trae as a backup? Pretty much like they had Devontae, not even the second back, not even the backup. What if he was like a third, just a guy you have on there for emergency?
Yeah, listen. So you got to have guys, who are just guys. So sure, Sohan, look, he does a lot of just interesting stuff on the court. He's also very inconsistent, but you saw the other night, how many points he had? Were like 28.
Yeah, and he hit a big 3 as well. And he had a bunch of rebounds, like 17, 18 rebounds.
If the Spurs can get that, Rudy, at least 15, 20 a night.
I was going to say at least half of that.
Yeah, it's half of that. But half the roster needs to be flipped. You want to keep him. Keldon, I could definitely see gone. I don't think you need to pay a guy. And he's not making that. Yeah, it's $20 million to do that. You can pay someone else to do that. Trust me. But if they can, listen, the trade with Atlanta, if you can get that kid there, Klay Thompson, there's other pieces in the offseason. There's going to be guys out there in free agency that the Spurs.
Hey, I say, Gio, let me think about this quickly. If you can get Trae and what's that young kid, Johnson, that's playing the power forward, the one that took John Collins' place.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't his name Jackson or something like that? What is his name?
What's his name, Rudy, from the Jazz?
Johnson or something. I think it's Johnson.
He's been playing well.
Yeah, that kid can play. If you can get him and Trae Young, and hell, you go from there. I give up the whole team if I can start with those.
Look, they need. Listen, I understand not listening because you never want to, as the front office, You don't want to listen, because if the Rams would have listened to me, the Rams would have traded a lot of guys. Okay. Look, you got to make sure you surround this team with talent next season. It's not a rush, but look, you got this unicorn back there. You got to surround him with talent. Listen, I can only imagine Derek him after a game and looking at the stat sheet at home or even in the office.
Jalen Johnson.
And thinking to yourself, what are these guys doing?
Did you see him the other day when he walked off the court, Victor, when he did that little scream before he walked off to the locker room?
Yeah.
That's frustration.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wish him well. But Jalen Johnson's his name. Thank you, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand. The Spurs understand that, it's frustrating times for Victor. He expected to come in and win, but I think Victor also understood the expectation wasn't, be world beaters his first year. He knew he wasn't going to come into a team. I mean, I've said it multiple times going into this season, just because you drafted Victor Wembanyama, that didn't mean you were going to be a playoff team. It didn't even mean you were going to be a play-in team. Now, did I expect them to be, 17 wins on the season? I had them at 22. They could still get to 22, but I didn't see Victor adding all of these wins to the Spurs, because you saw the team you had the year before. And you got to remember, you're adding Victor, but you're taking away from, minutes from so-and-so. You're taking away points from so-and-so. You're taking away points from Keldon and, Devin. He's going to Victor. So, again, you're adding Victor's points, decreasing these guys' points. It's not going to work to where wins go up.
Yeah, I think the Spurs did it injustice, not at least surrounding him with better talent.
They couldn't. There's no way. I mean, you traded away your two best players in Derek White and DeJounte Murray just to have a chance to get Victor. You sacrificed your two best players just to have a chance to get Victor Wembanyama. With DeJounte and Derek, the Spurs are not the worst team in the league. They're not a playoff team. They're not a play-in team, but they're not the worst team. So you had a sacrifice to get there. So you made the sacrifice. Now you have to, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And that's the problem the Spurs are facing. You've got talent that's mediocre at best with Victor Wembanyama. Now you've got to go out and surround him with star talent. If it's Trae Young, it's Trae Young. But again, a Trae Young, Victor Wembanyama only works with what you surround them. If you lose a Keldon, if you lose a Devin, and you surround him with Jeremy Sohan and Trae Young and Victor Wembanyama, that is not enough to make you a playoff team. Maybe a play-in team.
Rudy, I'm gonna have to get ready. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to get ready to sign off, man.
Yeah,
See you guys Friday, and I'm doing something good today. I got my 9th or 10th grade team. We got practice at 6.
Yeah, no worries. Actually, we're gonna end the show right now.
Where's
we're
Matt?
gonna get more of that.
I want Matt to know that I'm supporting.
Coach him hard, Derek. Coach him hard.
But I want Matt to see this. I'm on your side, Matt. So I'm definitely not a Tony Parker. I'm not against Tony Parker.
Yeah, we are all fans of the Spurs, man. We all cover them too. But hey, we're going to get into more talk on Friday. Hopefully tomorrow I'll have a special guest on Sweep the League as well. But we'll all be back on Friday for more Spurs talk and as well as NBA talk. Thanks for everyone for joining them. For Coach Gio, for Derek Gervin, it's Rudy Campos Jr. Until we Sweep the League again, we'll see you next time.
You two guys are the best, man. I sincerely mean that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We will see you on Friday.
Everybody. See you soon. See you Friday for me.